Chapter 7. Burning. My pain actually increased over the next days. My lower back muscles were extremely sore, hard and tense. I had had this kind of pain before, but when I lived at home I would often lie several hours in bed in the afternoon and just read. When I did that, I could focus mentally on my muscles and my breathing and try to relax my muscles, which offered me relief. Houses move and houses speak. If you take me there, you'll get relief. Sorry. But at the school, most hours were spent in the company of others. And I always seemed to tense up when I was being social, no matter how much I told myself to relax and focus on my breathing and so on. At first I ignored the pain, hoping it would go away, and kept on hanging out with people from the school, playing board games, talking and so on. But the pain just kept getting worse, and I felt increasingly drawn towards my bed. I went to the small library that they had there and found some work of fiction from the 19th century which I took to bed with me. For the sake of my health, I thus decided to only spend an hour or so after classes hanging out and then retire to my room. The time spent in bed increased gradually, and sometimes I would even spend a good majority of the day in bed. Sometimes my pain was so bad I couldn't even read, and I would lie listening to music or just suffer. To Carthage then I came, burning, burning, burning. The pain would sort of gather in my lower back, and there settle in my muscles. Those muscles would be intensely painful to the touch, but massaging them would bring relief afterwards. Well, that is at least what I tell people, that the pain is in the lower back. It's close to the truth, but actually the sore spot is, well, in a bit more embarrassing location. Well, whatever, might as well tell it. Ecce homo, behold the man, and so forth. The spot that got extremely sore was the sphincter, in the ass that is. But don't for a moment think that I'm just using it as an excuse to touch myself there, for I didn't start touching my ass on my own initiative. It was a physical therapist who first identified the sore and tense muscles there, and who put on a glove and yeah. And she was a woman, so again no, etc, etc. But at the school she was much farther away, and when the pain got bad enough, I simply had to massage myself. Of course I took the proper hygienic precautions. I put my finger in a condom, and then proceeded to do that which many people think males should not do, though of course I was exempt from their censure for medical reasons. Sometimes the pain was so excruciating that I took a towel and stuffed it into my mouth, just so that I had something to bite on. I got the idea from movie scenes where they have to amputate a leg without anesthesia, and they put a cloth or whatever into the patient's mouth. Though I'm pretty sure it's more painful to have a saw going back and forth into one's leg. But when the pain from my muscles was at its worst, I could only stand about a minute or so of massage, and then afterwards I was completely exhausted and maybe a little traumatized. Here it would have been ideal if I had my own room, but alas, I did not. I hope my roommates never found out. At one time I watched a movie together with Marcus in my room, and hidden under my blanket I lay and massaged myself. This would have been perfectly acceptable and reasonable if the tension and soreness were anywhere else on my body. But that place is shameful and forbidden, so I had to hide. If Marcus had discovered what I was doing, he would probably have freaked out and told everyone. Lucky for me, he didn't discover or suspect anything. Of course I only used the towel trick when no one else was in the room. Marcus would sometimes keep me company while I was lying in my bed, which was surprising to me given his energetic nature. Once in a while we would have a discussion in our room, and we didn't just talk about girls. Marcus didn't care much about philosophy or literature, but he had read some history and was especially interested in World War II. So we talked sometimes about that, and he would talk about where Hitler went wrong, perhaps implying he would have done better if he had been the one to call the shots. But one thing that annoyed me was his fixations on dates. He would obsess about dates, and think that if he knew the important dates in a period, he would be an expert on what happened. When did Hitler invade Poland? He would quiz me. In September 1939, I answered, glad I remembered that. Yes, that is correct, but what date? I don't know what date exactly, I confessed. It was the 1st September, at 40 minutes past 4 in the morning. he would answer proudly. And so on with various dates. When Hitler died, when Germany invaded Russia, and so on. It would annoy me since I knew roughly what happened, but not the exact dates. Today I think it's actually very foolish to focus on dates. It doesn't really matter if Poland was invaded on the 1st, the 3rd or the 5th September. It matters more why they were invaded. An example. The Nazi-Soviet Pact was signed on the 23rd August 1939. But that doesn't matter much exactly, just as long as you don't think they signed in, say, 1956 or something like that. What matters much more is the reason why the Soviet Union signed such a pact. One thing that is often overlooked is the fact that the British and the French did not want to enter an anti-fascist pact with the Soviet Union. A week after the refusal of the anti-fascist pact offer, the Soviet Union instead made the non-aggression treaty with Hitler. So perhaps we shouldn't put too much blame on the Soviet Union for such a pact, but look also at the West and why they refused. Information like this is much more interesting than knowing the exact date of something. It is hard for other people to understand why I was in pain. There were no external symptoms, except perhaps that I didn't stand as straight as normal people do. But besides that, everything looked normal, and I appeared more like some lazy fellow who just preferred lying in bed all day, a 21st century Oblomov. I'm not even exactly sure myself why I am suffering. All the doctors that have examined me just shrug their shoulders and say something vague like, "Make sure you eat a healthy warm meal every day," and that's it. Some think it's all in my head, which it may partly be. I think it started with being anxious in my elementary school. I was very afraid of losing my position in my classroom, of becoming a social reject. I was pretty popular, but there was always in the back of my head a kind of worst case scenario. What could I possibly do that could make everyone dislike and shun me? I was very afraid of smelling bad, even though I showered every morning and had never heard any complaints. Nor did people avoid sitting next to me or anything like it. It became so bad one time in class that I would twist words that I could barely hear into talk about me. It became a sort of paranoia, and the 6 to 8 hours I spent in the classroom I was always very tense. I was way more at ease alone in front of a computer. Here I could interact with the world without being physically present, and I did not have to worry about my physical body and whether or not I smelled or had a much dreaded accident or whatever. I think the combination of tensing up a lot in class and then coming home, sitting the rest of the day in front of the computer, fucked up my musculature. I must have developed a combination of repetitive strain injury, carpal tunnel syndrome, and chronic muscle tension. If you fuck up one major muscle, other muscles will compensate for that, and so these will get fucked up as well, and then other muscles and so on, until pretty much every muscle in your body is abnormal except your heart and dick. Which I guess are the two main important muscles, so it's all good fam. And if the dick isn't a muscle, I invoke poetic license. My editor was so kind to inform me it's not, and my research corroborates his claim, since one guy on Yahoo Answers tells me that if it was a muscle, you could use it in a workout to make it bigger. The hardest part about writing a novel is not getting bogged down talking about dicks. And I'm not even gay, though perhaps a little bi-curious, but who isn't? As long as the balls don't touch, it's fine. One should think I was the least likely candidate for such a limit in my life that my muscle pains are. The reason for this is that my mother is a physical therapist, and so I should have been in good hands. Yet all I got was stretches, and they haven't helped much. I have an idea that if I just lie down in bed a lot and focus on my muscles and breathing, I can pretty much become painless again. The problem is that it is incredibly boring, so I will lie down some when it gets bad, and then get so mind-numbingly bored that I will start to watch a movie, jerk off, or even worse, play a computer game, thus losing all the improvements I got from my meditational relaxation techniques. Oh well, I shouldn't complain too much. I wouldn't even call my condition a handicap, since I'm able to do what everyone else can. My doctor says I'm a healthy, normal young man. The only thing I'm really limited at is being too social, and I don't even like being social a lot, so that's fine. It's probably a bit better condition than having medium headaches often, so enough self-commiseration, and on to the failed conquest of Helen, which at least made Marcus impressed with my boldness. Marcus did not understand why I lay in bed so much, and I did not even bother trying to explain it to him. That was probably our final break, Now he simply found me too weird, though he still tried to reform my dress. He called me the voluntary invalid, and Hassan sometimes jokingly came into our room saying, "Rise, Lazarus, rise," and then went out again. The two grew closer together, though there was no extra room at the top of the triumvirate for Hassan. But he was satisfied as long as he perceived that there was someone beneath him he could lord it over. Arise, ye wretched of the earth. One day Marcus warily approached me. He looked a bit sheepish, which was unusual for him. "You're pretty good friends with Eric, aren't you?" he asked me. "I wouldn't say I'm good friends with him," I responded cautiously. "I talk with him sometimes, though it's hard to get to know him since he's so shy." "Well, at least you get along better with him than Hassan. Those two are constantly fighting, and they are practically tearing each other apart in that room." I suspected that he was exaggerating, since I hadn't heard anything so dramatic between those two. All I heard from Hassan was that he found it annoying that Eric snored quite loudly, and that he was also bothered about how silent Eric was. But apart from that, they seemed to manage sharing a small room reasonably well, about as well as me and Marcus. "They have gotten along so far at least," I said. "I tell you, Lazarus, it's only a matter of time before they will come to hate each other," Marcus replied. Now I discussed something with Hassan that I found quite a good idea. I didn't say anything, and he hesitated before continuing. "Well, you see, the thing is, and don't take this the wrong way, but I was thinking maybe you could swap with Hassan. Then you could share the room with Eric, and Hassan could move in with me." "You don't want me as a roommate anymore?" I asked him. "Well," he said, obviously uncomfortable. "It's not that I don't want you as a roommate. I just think the other arrangement would be better. We get along, but I don't know. We don't really have much in common. I think we both would be happy if we got new roommates." I considered his proposal. I wasn't very fond of staying with Marcus, but I didn't relish the prospect of moving in with Eric. He was just too taciturn, and I hardly knew him. At least I knew I could live with Marcus, but Eric was an unknown, and it bothered me that Marcus was trying to kick me out of the room. I decided that if he wasn't happy with me as a roommate, he could move out, not me. "No," I finally said. "No? Come on, at least consider it. It's nothing personal, it's just—" and there he trailed off, not wanting to finish the sentence. "I'm not going to move in with Eric. You don't have to stay here, however. You can move out, but you can't pick my new roommate," I told him. He seemed annoyed and might have been about to press the matter further, if not for the ringing of the dinner bell. As we walked down to the mess hall, he put on a smile and said, "It's okay if you don't want to swap with Hassan, but just give it a couple of days to think over it, okay?" I didn't reply, and when we came to the mess hall, we each chose a different table. Chapter 8. Helen. My way of wooing Helen was somewhat unusual. She would often chill in her room, listening to music, or she would read some subversive literature. Sometimes she would even meditate, like me. Her room was only 10 meters or so from mine, so whenever I knew she was alone, and I could muster the courage, I would go knock on her door. I would be allowed to lie on her bed, doing breathing exercises, and trying to lessen my pain. She was one of the few who I had explained my condition to, who seemed to accept it. Most would either think it was merely my mind playing tricks on me, and that I should just snap out of it. Some would even find it amusing and laugh when I explained that it was mainly due to excessive computer use. I learned to explain my condition as back pain, just to avoid being laughed at. Her door was slightly open, which usually meant that she wouldn't mind company. I knocked on her door and asked her if she wanted to hang out. "Oh, hey, Lazarus," she said, and gave me a slight smile. "Yeah, sure, I'm just reading. You can use my roommate's bed. She's home for the weekend." And so I just lay in her room doing breathing exercises with my eyes closed. "Look, Lazarus, a bird," she suddenly said, after I had lain in her bed for quite some time. I opened my eyes and looked out the window. Yeah, a crow? They are in those trees all the time?" She laughed. "Sorry, it's a joke. I'm reading about a woman who tells her husband, 'Look, a sheep,' because he has mental health issues and a doctor has told them that he should look at real things. Poor Septimus." "What book are you reading?" I said. "It's Mrs. Dalloway by the Wolf." "The Wolf?" I asked her. "Yeah, Virginia Woolf. It's pretty good. You should read it sometime," Helen said. Maybe I will. Haven't heard of her before. Scary name. She was a pretty troubled person, ended up drowning herself just before turning 60. I really like her writing style, Helen said. At that time Helen was much more widely read than I was. So unfortunately, all I could say was, cool. If only I had read some stuff from this wolf, I could then say some impressive stuff that would, well, impress Helen. I had decided to read the classics, but wanted to start from the beginning, and I had this foolish notion that I would read everything from the ancients before moving on. So I was stuck on Plato at the moment, and had not really read any classic books that were less than 2000 years old. It was kinda weird lying in her room with just the two of us there. But I had not made any moves on her or even tried to flirt at all. I think she may have seen me as a kind of non-sexual being, and so accepted my presence much as she would a female friend. This period of having a close platonic relationship did not last, however, and later, though we remained friends, she would insist on there being other people around. Our conversations when we were together began to be more personal. In the start we had barely talked at all. We began to be intimate, though her physical distance was still frustratingly far away, yet she was also tantalizing close. But she would always sit at her desk on the other side of the room, and she never lay or even sat down on any of the beds while I was there. Sometimes the playboy Martin would make our chill-out session pretty awkward. His room was right next to Helen, and the walls were not very thick. He was currently seeing a cute blonde, and they would often loudly express their love for each other. We did our best to ignore the moans and groans, but it wasn't always easy. I would sometimes get a hard-on when I could hear them, but I managed to conceal it pretty well, I think. And I also managed to resist the temptation to furtively touch myself. I'm sure Helen would have noticed that, and either helped me, or most likely indignantly kicked me out of her room. Once, when they were very loud next door, and ignoring it was not an option, I couldn't resist asking Helen, "Is he as good as it sounds like he is?" Helen was surprised by my question, and it was the first time I had seen her blush a little, but she quickly regained her composure and smilingly said to me, "He's not half bad. He has a lot of experience, that's for sure." Unlike me, I sighed. I didn't mean to tell her about it, but couldn't help myself. "You are a virgin, aren't you?" Helen asked me bluntly. I wasn't sure whether or not I should tell her the truth, but I decided I might as well. I think she would have seen through me if I had tried to lie. "Well, I haven't done the full intercourse thing," I explained, "but I have had a girlfriend for a while, and once I was really close." I looked away, thinking that admitting my almost total lack of female interaction would surely make Helen even less attracted to me. "It is nothing to be ashamed of," she told me. "Some just do it later than others. I'd recommend trying to lose your virginity sooner rather than later, though. It only gets more awkward the older you get." "It's not like I haven't been trying," I said. I almost asked her there and then if she would help me. "Can I ask you when you lost your virginity?" I said instead. "Yeah, I guess. I was pretty young," Helen said. "How young is that?" "I was 12 when I first had sex." 12? I almost shouted. "I mean, isn't that illegal? Not for you, that is, but the guy?" "Yeah, it is," Helen said. "But it wasn't like I was abused or anything. My older brother had a really cute friend, and he liked me as well. One thing led to another. He became my first boyfriend, a secret boyfriend, that is. Though my brother didn't like it at all. He even threatened to report his friend, but I talked sense into him." "How old was the guy at the time?" I asked her. "I think he was 16 or maybe 17. I remember feeling really proud of having hooked up with an older guy. My best friend was so envious. She had liked him as well." "I mean, I don't want to judge," I said, "but that sounds really wrong. You weren't old enough to give consent. He could just manipulate you. You couldn't understand what you were doing." Helen got annoyed when I said this. "Who are you to judge whether or not I knew what I was doing? I had seen pictures and heard about stuff before I met him. I'd even started masturbating sometimes. Don't tell me what I could or couldn't understand." "Hell, your brain doesn't even fully develop until you're like 25 years old. Can you give consent now, even though you are 19? Do you truly know what you're doing? Maybe the male age of consent should be 25. No sex allowed for you before that." "I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't mean to judge you or anything. It just seems wrong. I mean, how did you even—" Never mind. My point is that he was in a very powerful position over you, both mentally and physically. even though you may have willingly consented, and you knew full well what you were doing. How can you know he didn't manipulate you? What's all this talk about manipulating? She replied. So I touched his cock, made him come, sucked a bit on it, and other things. So fucking what? What's really the difference between touching him and making him come, and tickling him and making him laugh? It's just a touch. It feels nice and doesn't hurt anyone, Helen said rather angrily. And sure, he was stronger physically than me and more mentally developed, but he didn't force me physically, and I was smart and old enough to know what I was doing. Someone is always in a position of power over someone else. If a boss fucks an employee, does that make it abuse and coercion? No, it depends on the individual case. If he had just grabbed me and taken me, that would be fucked up. But that didn't happen. You know nothing about it, so don't judge me or him. Just because he has the potential of control over me doesn't mean the possibility that I can consent is removed. Helen had worked herself into quite a fury. I didn't know what to say, and she quickly continued. We might as well not allow people under, say, 90 IQ to have sex, cause surely they could not meaningfully consent. Surely they could not understand the vast importance and significance of sex, and its wide-ranging, shattering consequences. People make such a big deal out of sex. It really annoys me sometimes. And the age of consent laws are just so arbitrary. I mean, in places it is 18, here it is 15, some places it is 13. It was set to 11 in the Napoleonic Code. The laws are just such a mess and all over the place. The whole notion of age of consent is just so muddled anyway. I'm sorry, I told her, trying to calm her down. I didn't mean to be judgmental or anything. It's just you hear stories and all these things. You aren't the first to act like you ruined my life, Helen said, sounding a bit less angry now. That's just bullshit. I'm fine, he's fine. And no, I don't need to see a shrink to uncover the trauma I have repressed deeply because I touched his penis. Alright, I replied. When I think about it, I guess I wouldn't have minded some busty 17-year-old girl getting interested in me when I was 12. Though I'm not sure whether or not I started masturbating when I was 12 or 13. Might have been 12. I remember being really proud of having watched a porn movie and telling my friend about it, trying to impress him with how mature I now was. It's funny, South Park has a scene where Kyle is talking to the police because of his little brother Ike. Ike has a sexual relationship with one of his teachers, and when the policeman hears it, they all gather around him, being really serious and worried. But when he tells them that the teacher is a woman, who they know to be a hot babe, they all go, nice. I'm not sure what South Park's point is, or if they have a point, but that scene is hilarious. Helen laughed. I haven't watched that one. Maybe we should watch it sometimes. Haven't watched the show for years. You haven't missed that much. Her mood was better now, and her laughter had made me bold, especially with all that she had said about sex not being a big deal and so on. So I decided to make a rather naughty request. So, with sex being not that big of a deal and, well, you know, me being a virgin and all, well, I was wondering if you could kind of help me out, if you know what I mean, I said, trying to smile but feeling like I wanted to bury my face in shame. Helen looked at me surprised. Oh, Lazarus, she said, sighing. I'm not just gonna have sex with you like that. And besides, that would be kind of cheating. You gotta work for the abolishment of your virginity. And I think I have done enough casual one-night stands lately. Sorry, Lazarus, gotta try harder. And so I did, but only much later, and with another girl. Right then, I felt rejected and dejected, and also extremely awkward for having asked her in such a manner. I should really ask Martin how you do the whole girls thing. The worst part of having asked Helen like that was that I didn't dare for a long time to go knocking on her door. And when I finally did it again, she seemed reluctant to hang out just the two of us. If her roommate wasn't there, her door would usually be closed. The other times she said she would rather be alone, and so I was only allowed to be there when her roommate was there as well. Chapter 9. Duct tape. If Eric knew that I had refused to move in with him, he gave no signs of knowing it. Hassan, however, didn't take the news calmly when Marcus told him that I had refused. He came over to me immediately after having been told. At first he was calm and mannered, trying to charm me into moving out. When he found out that I was adamant about staying, he became nasty and started abusing both me and Eric. He even threatened lodging a formal complaint, though he didn't clarify what exactly he would complain about and how this would in any way help him move in with Marcus. I considered teasing him by asking why they were so set on moving in together, thinking about a subtle way to imply that their relationship may not be strictly heterosexual. I desisted, though mainly because I couldn't find a clever way to insinuate it. It would also probably be funnier and more risky to imply it to Marcus, since he was quite homophobic. Danny, the one openly gay guy we had at the school, Marcus stayed clear of. Danny even knew about Marcus's dislike or unease with him, or whatever it was. Marcus was anything but subtle when it came to who he liked or disliked. Anyway, as it came to pass, I actually moved out a few weeks after Marcus's proposal. Relations in our small room grew noticeably chillier after that talk, but instead of swapping place with Hassan, I moved to another room. It was also in the hallway, but had only one occupant. I had also talked quite well with Alexander, and it was only when it came to the ladies that he was weird and a little creepy. When he heard about the whole debacle with Marcus wanting to get rid of me, he invited me to come stay in his room. I thought about it for a while, though I was leaning towards just staying with Marcus, perhaps partly because I wanted to spite and defy him. But Marcus managed to change my mind one night. After a rude awakening and a lot of duct tape, I finally decided that I had enough of Marcus. Don't get too excited though, it's not as dramatic as you might think. The duct tape wasn't used on me, rather I used it to secure my own sleep. You see, what happened was that Marcus had invented a game a few drunken boys in the school loved, and which pretty much everyone else didn't dare oppose. It had become the norm that every time there was a party, at some point in the night, when those who stayed and partied hard got bored just partying with each other, they would start to prank those who had gone to bed, say at 1 a.m. There were locks on all the doors, but most people shared a room, which meant that each room had at least 2 keys. It started with Marcus and Sune pranking Martin, the other member of the triumvirate. Martin had retired early from that party, since his charm had secured him another companion to warm his bed. Marcus and Sune were not pleased with his early departure, however, and they easily managed to pressure Martin's roommate into lending them the key. Apparently they snuck in after the 2 lovers had fallen asleep. With no more sound than the mice make, their hands moved to and fro upon Martin's pretty visage. Luckily, they also had ways to document their great art, which, alas, is ephemeral, since the bearer may conceivably remove it out of the sense that he is not worthy to be the bearer of such beautiful lines. So after they drew on him with black pens, they photographed him, and when he woke up they ran out of his room with both his and the girls' underwear. That was how the school lost the privacy of the rooms. Breaking into another person's room was no longer a crime, and was rather seen as a good prank. But luckily I am a light sleeper, and when Marcus, Hassan and a couple of other guys tried to sneak into my room to draw, and do I know not what other things they might have intended, I awoke immediately. As soon as I heard the lock turn, though it was ever so softly, I sprang awake and sat up in bed. Saying loud and clear, "Nice try, boys, but I'm completely awake," they exclaimed their dismay and went away. I was not sure, however, if they would come back later, and I doubted that I could go to sleep knowing that wolves prowled the night, perhaps coming back later to strike at my face with their pens. That wasn't a Freudian slip. That was just an innocent misclick. Luckily, as a resourceful young man, I had plenty of duct tape in my bag. So after some consideration, I decided to duct tape the door shut, rendering Marcus's key useless. This had the double satisfaction of keeping me safe and not giving Marcus a place to sleep. About half an hour and a full roll of duct tape later, the task was done. It kept away any outsiders, but unfortunately also entombed me in the room as well. I realized I could not use the toilet before going back to sleep, and this thought caused me much anxiety. Finally I decided to use the sink in the room, and spent the next minutes massaging my limp dick above the sink with the tap turned on, trying to stimulate my own passing of water. I succeeded in squeezing a few drops out, and being now reassured that my bladder was completely empty, I went back to sleep, with almost no anxiety about possibly wetting my own bed. When I woke the next morning, I was at first puzzled why the door was duct taped, and having remembered, I was then puzzled why I had not been woken by the rustle of the key in the lock, and Marcus's loud banging at the door when he realized he couldn't get in. I removed the duct tape, which almost took more time than putting it up. I then went down to eat. Marcus wasn't there, and when I met him later, I looked at him carefully, but could detect no trace of resentment or even awareness of the fact that I had barricaded him out. I concluded that he must have slept somewhere else, and had not even tried to get in again after his first prank failed. This was a great disappointment to me. I had duct taped my door completely shut to no avail, but at least I had slept soundly and got a cool picture out of it. He was quite amused when I told him what I had done, and he actually promised to not try to prank me again. I guess he figured it must have annoyed me quite a lot since I went through the trouble of taping our door shut. Anyway, duct tape truly is the solution to innumerable problems, and is perhaps the one thing in the universe that cannot be overrated. I was a bit nervous at night when staying with Alexander though, despite Marcus's promise. I didn't think Alexander capable of doing pranks on me, but it wouldn't have been so difficult for Marcus to convince Alexander to hand over the key to our room. He actually kept the promise, but I'm not sure if it was due to me being just lucky that they didn't choose my room again, or that Marcus actually remembered his promise even when he was in a drunken stupor. Or perhaps Alexander had stood up for me and refused to hand over the key, resisting the peer pressure of the triumvirate. I highly doubt that, however. He would probably have sold his mother's soul if that meant he could be included among the popular boys. Anyway, whatever condition Alexander had worsened a month after I moved in with him, and he actually left the school. We had a jolly time together, so I'm certain he didn't leave because of me. I think it was because he was unhappily in love. He had a crush on a pretty buxom girl, whom he tried awkwardly for a long time to seduce. She wasn't really interested though, and besides, she already had a boyfriend, though he wasn't at the school. At one of our hall meetings, she had mentioned that she was taking math exams at a school nearby, but that she wasn't sure if she would pass. I loved math when I was in high school, Alexander quickly said, jumping at the opportunity. I can help you study for it. The girl looked at him skeptically. I don't want to be a bother. I can probably manage, she said. But Alexander insisted. It is no bother. It will be a pleasure to look at all the calculations and stuff again, and I don't mind at all. So the girl had accepted Alexander's help. Marcus was extremely jealous and attributed the basest motive to Alexander. Later that day he had come into our room, winking and nudging Alexander, saying as sarcastically as he could how impressed he was with Alexander's eagerness to spread wisdom and help others selflessly. If Marcus had been better at math, there might possibly have been a fight that meeting between the two, to decide who would take on the onerous burden. Luckily for Alexander, Marcus hated math. Yet the next day, after Alexander had helped her out in her room, he came back almost in tears. What's wrong? I asked him, suspecting he had not been able to remember the math as well as he thought, and had been a disappointment to her. I just don't get women, he said, throwing himself on his bed and burying his face in his pillow. I didn't do anything and she got mad, he mumbled in his pillow. What, man? I can't hear you at all. And saying so, I went over to him and pulled his pillow out from under his face. I said I didn't do anything and she got mad, he told me angrily, snatching his pillow back, but lying on his back now. Alright, calm down, I said. Just tell me what happened. I didn't do anything, he repeated. All I did was sit in her bed cross-legged, and she sat next to me against the wall. I didn't even get a hard-on or anything. And we looked at the math together, and I did my best to help her. I quickly found out she needed all the help she could get, but I was nice and didn't say that to her. We went reasonably along, and she seemed to be happy that she had accepted my offer. So far so good, I told him. Yeah, but then things started getting weird, so I was just sitting there cross-legged, and at one point she moved a bit closer to me. Well, you know, she has big breasts, and now her breast was touching my right knee. I had not moved closer to her, she had, so I thought she should be the one to move away again. Like, how is it fair that I'm supposed to move away if she puts her tits against me? It's not like I moved to touch them. It didn't bother me, though it was a bit awkward. I knew that she knew that I knew that her breast was touching me. But still, it's only fair she move away, not me. So I didn't move. And then after a couple of minutes, she suddenly started getting angry at me. She said that I was touching her breast. I then started arguing my case, saying she was the one who had put her breast against my knee. But that made her even angrier, and I ended up apologizing to her, and then she threw me out of her room. She even said I was a creep as I walked away. I just don't get girls. I just tried to help her, he concluded, tears flowing down his cheeks. I did my best to comfort him, taking his side, saying she was weird and so on, and that he was a nice guy, that he deserved better, but nothing seemed to help. Alexander became depressed and stopped attending classes. He just lay in bed almost the whole day, even more than I did. I think the final blow came a couple of days after the incident. We were both lying in bed, Alexander red-eyed and sad, and me doing my breathing exercises. Our door was slightly open, and we heard the voice of the girl Alexander had helped. She was talking to her roommate. Their room was only a few meters from ours, and the door must not have been closed as well. I couldn't hear much, but I did distinctly hear, "I'm so tired of that guy. I wish he didn't live so close too." I looked over at Alexander, not sure if he had heard it as well. He gave no sign other than turning his face towards the wall, and I went up and closed our door. A few days after, he left the school. So I was without a roommate again. I lived alone for a while, then got the new roommate who almost drowned in his own puke. He was biased against me, and we certainly didn't get along very well. For some reason, Danny was also without a roommate at that time, and when he suggested that it would be nice if we shared a room, I left the slurping guy. We were sort of friends, and he seemed pleasant enough, so I readily accepted his proposal. I must admit I was a bit uneasy moving in with him since, I knew he was gay. But he knew I wasn't gay, and I thought I would be kinda homophobic if I refused to share a room with him just because of that. He was my last and final roommate, and we ended up sharing the room until our stay ended. He was my nicest roommate, and I wished I had been placed together with him from the start. One thing did disappoint me a bit though. When I tried to talk about philosophy and literature with him, he just said he didn't care about such stuff and didn't think about it. "How come?" I asked, puzzled. I knew he was intelligent and well-spoken, so his statement took me aback. "It's just too depressing. I would rather not think about it at all." I didn't know what to respond to that at the time, so I just shook my head and dropped the subject. Perhaps today I would tell him what Nietzsche said. Nietzsche treated deep problems like a cold swim, quickly in and quickly out. That way you won't get too depressed when you learn about the state of things. Just don't fall into the trap thinking that it is existence itself there's something wrong with, and there's no solution. Just look at a nice doge, and see how happy it can be. But chain the doge and treat it badly, and it will be a sad, depressed doge. Perhaps man is much like a doge. His feathers are just better concealed, and he may not even know he is being mistreated. There was one incident in our room that was a bit awkward. As you already know, I used condoms when I massaged myself. At first I would go to great lengths to hide the dirty condoms, but after a while I got lazy and just threw them in the wastebasket in my room, covering them with some tissue papers. I still massaged myself while living with Danny, and I'm pretty sure he didn't know about it. But one day Helen was hanging out with us, and when she threw an apple in our wastebasket, it uncovered a dirty condom. Helen saw it and looked at me, but didn't say anything. Luckily Danny didn't see anything. Later I explained to Helen that it wasn't what she thought, though I didn't explain what I actually used it for. She nodded, but said that, "Whatever you guys do in your room is none of my business." I tried again to assure her that I was strictly heterosexual and that nothing had happened between me and my roommate, but I'm not sure Helen believed me. "It's fine, I don't care. You don't have to tell me anything or make any explanations," she said. "But I'm telling you," I started again, but then thought better of it. I didn't mention it again. Neither did Helen, and I'm fairly certain she told no one else. Chapter 10. A Proposal. I had not given up on Helen yet, despite all that had happened. She had rejected my plea for help, but she did say that I should try harder. So during the next month I did my best to woo Helen. We were still friends, and she liked spending time with me, and it wasn't just me initiating things. She would often knock on my door and ask if I wanted to go play basketball with her. She even laughed a lot when we were together. Yet even though she wanted to spend time with me, she would always make sure we were at least 3. And if I tried to get her to myself at say a party, she would often ask, "Why would we go there? All the people and the fun are here." I grew increasingly frustrated with just being her friend. I was fearing that I was in the process of being friend-zoned, and in my darkest hours I dreaded that I was already firmly established in that zone. I tried everything to make her think I was a cool free spirit like her. I even went dumpster diving with her one night, though of course she planned it so it wasn't just the 2 of us. We went to the back of a nearby supermarket and found plenty of vegetables that were still edible. Afterwards I had to force myself to eat some of the food we had scavenged. Yet the experience was better than I expected. The best part about going looking for food in the night was that I felt like one of my ancient ancestors. I was like a hunter-gatherer in the forgotten past, out searching for food in my urban wilderness. As I felt I was going nowhere with her and probably becoming stuck, I became desperate. I decided to stake it all and simply tell her how I felt. And why not? All the other girls I was interested in so far in my life, I had never dared to tell how I felt, though I sometimes suspected they liked me just as much as I liked them. I was simply too shy. But no more, Lazarus, I told myself. Try something different. You are 19 now. You don't want to be shy for the rest of your life. So one day when Helen was alone, I knocked on her door and asked if she could come into my room, because I wanted to talk to her about something important. Surprised and perhaps somewhat reluctant, she assented. Okay, fine then. I'll be there in 2 minutes, Helen said. As she came into my room later, I said nothing, but simply went over to her, took hold of both her hands, and kissed her on the cheek. Then I said that I liked her, and that I didn't just only want to have sex, but that I wanted to be her boyfriend. Oh, Lazarus, why didn't you say so before? Helen said, radiant with joy. I have been in love with you the moment we built that snowman together. And then she pulled off her shirt, pushed me down in my bed, and that day I lost my virginity. As she came into my room later, I said nothing, but simply went over to her, took hold of both her hands, and kissed her on the cheek. Then I said that I liked her, and that I didn't just only want to have sex, but that I wanted to be her boyfriend. She said nothing, but simply pulled her hands away and started laughing. It wasn't a cruel laugh, but not just a nervous laugh either. It was the kind of laugh that's followed by, "That's really sweet, but..." "That's really sweet," Helen said after she had stopped laughing, "but I'm afraid you're not my type." Then she gave me a hug and started leaving the room. "But you said I should try harder," I said, grabbing her arm before she could leave. "Oh, Lazarus, I didn't mean me, I just meant generally. You don't just ask a girl for sex. Anyway, I'm not interested, and if you can't understand that, I'm not sure we can be friends anymore." Then she left. I'm sure you can guess which of the two scenarios is the one that happened. Hint, I didn't get to make the two-back beast that day. When she said I wasn't her type, I think she meant I was neither cool enough, confident enough, experienced enough, well-dressed enough, or just interesting enough for her. I'm glad she just said I was not her type. I'm not sure how I would have handled the truth at that time, though the rejection still stung somewhat. But Lazarus learned. It took many years, and present-day Lazarus would surely have a better shot. That's the only progress I still believe in. I was proud of myself. The story I had told myself so far, that had filled me with regret, was that I had not seized the opportunities to get a girl that was available to me. Now I had done my best. I had dared to put myself out there, dared to be rejected, and the worst had happened. And it wasn't so bad. After Helen left, Troy did not burn to the ground. Rather I or Troy, perhaps that's a fucking stupid metaphor for myself. Anyway, I was fine. I had so much adrenaline in my body that right after Helen left my room, I did 20 push-ups. Then I put on my running clothes and ran to an old castle a couple of kilometers away. And the best thing was that now I knew Helen was out of the question, so I simply did my best to try to forget about her. And I succeeded quite successfully. I barely spoke to her during the rest of our months at the school, and I actually didn't mind it too much. That evening I lay exhausted in bed when I suddenly decided that I would tell Marcus about it. He had often teased me for being in love with Helen, and now I had finally done something about it. So I sprang up from my bed and hurried over to his room to boast. "Guess what I did today?" I said as soon as I had almost slammed open his door. He was doing push-ups and didn't respond before he had finished counting to 25. He was surprised to see me, but quickly recovered his usual composure. "I don't know," Marcus said, jumping up and sounding uninterested. "You did some breathing exercises? And maybe finished some boring book? You know I don't care about your meditation, nor your books." "I told Helen I loved her, and she rejected me," I exclaimed proudly. "You did what?" Marcus seemed taken completely aback. "You actually told her that straight up?" "Yeah, I just asked her to come to my room, then took her hands, kissed her, and said that I liked her. She said she wasn't interested, gave me a hug, and then left." "I can't believe you actually did that." And then, to my surprise, Marcus commended my boldness. "I would never have dared that. You know, Lazarus, you are kinda weird, but man, you got some balls." "It's funny," I said. "I don't actually feel bad at all. I just feel good. I took a chance and I got rejected, but it's fine. Marcus grinned and jumped down on the floor to do some more push-ups. Good for you, he said before starting. After a couple of push-ups, he stopped and then asked me, tell me this, did you at least put on your jeans when you declared your undying love for her? Nah, man, I told you I don't do jeans anymore, I told him. Man, you're hopeless. You could get girls so easily if you just put on some nice jeans instead of those fucking sweatpants you're wearing all the time, he said, exasperated for having to tell me this the 1000th time. Perhaps, but sweatpants are more comfortable, I said, grinning and not really minding his jeans speech right now. Marcus shook his head, then walked out and went over to my room. I followed him, and inside my room he found my cabinet and pulled out my only pair of jeans. Then he pulled out some sweatpants and held them side by side. Pussy magnet, he said, speaking slowly and robotically, holding the jeans up. Girls like, get action. Then he held up my sweatpants. Pussy repellent. Look like hobo. Burn them all. I just shrugged, then laughed, waved him away, and jumped in my bed, and then put on my earbuds. I can't hear you, I shouted. Marcus gave up and put my things back. Unburned. Chapter 11. The Feminist. Helen was now in the past, and I did my best to forget her. It helped that fresh blood arrived at the school not long after my romantic declaration. About halfway into my stay at Grundvis, those people that had been here before I came left the school. Only a few days after their departure, they were replaced by new arrivals. Among them was Mette, who quickly chose me as her intended. I was a little turned off by her obvious attention, but also flattered. I thought she was a sweet girl, so I accepted her advances, though she was by no means the prettiest at the school. At that point it had been years since I had been kissed by a girl, and I was getting somewhat desperate. Why exactly she chose me among the many boys is not something I really know. But I know the moment she got infatuated with me. The moment I won her heart was also the exact moment I was met with loud disapproval from the majority of the girls at the school, and was even told by a girl to shut your fucking mouth. I was so dumbfounded when she said that in front of the whole school that I asked her whether or not she meant me. This question was answered by several other girls angrily and quickly shouting, yes, so you can imagine that I pissed quite a few of them off. You see, the school had invited a guest speaker to speak for an hour or so on some topic, and the speaker that night happened to be a feminist who spoke on the differences between boys and girls, and how they were all immaterial. After she had given her lecture, I questioned some of the claims that she had made. I don't quite remember what she said exactly, or what I objected to, but my first mistake was probably the fact that I challenged her in a very aggressive way. I have written down 3 questions for you, I began. Number 1, and so forth. Already I had marked myself as an enemy of her cause, though I just wanted to engage in a discussion of some of the things she said. I remember one of my objections was about brain size, and how what was important was not the total size of the brain, but the size of the brain relative to the rest of the body. But I remember now my chief objection. She had mentioned that some men had recently gathered together to form men's societies, to talk about men's right, a concept she mentioned with a sarcastic smile. She had been part of a demonstration that had shut down some of those meetings. Those men are part of the patriarchy. They are the oppressors, born into a position of privilege and advantage. It makes no sense for them to go together and talk about their rights, unless they want to raise themselves by oppressing women, by turning back our hard-fought victories. And if they really want to talk about gender power and oppression and so on, they are welcome to join one of the many feminist clubs that welcome men who are conscious of their oppression of women. This was my chief annoyance with her talk. I objected, saying that those men might have real grievances in their lives they would want to discuss among themselves. Problems that women might not understand, just like women have problems they would rather discuss among themselves. A man might be short, have a small penis, or simply be unable to attract anyone of the opposite sex. Even if you're a man, you can easily end up at the bottom of our oppressive, hierarchical social system. It was at my second point, about the brain sizes, that the shouting started. After I had found out that they indeed meant me, I was stunned into silence, and the question session ended soon afterwards. Right after, I hurried over to the soccer table to play against my new and first truly black friend, Mahmoud. As we battled each other, Mette came over. Even though she had been at the school for a week or so, I had not really noticed her before she came to me that night. Weeks later, when we were a couple, she actually asked me whether or not I had noticed her before she came to the soccer table that night. I had not noticed you or anyone else, I said, which was a lie since I had noticed some of the other newcomers. But what was I to say? Tell her the truth that I had not noticed her, but I had noticed that short-haired blonde girl? Clever, was all that she said to my answer. Anyway, she came to the soccer table and apologized for the other girls' rude shouts, and said that I had been brave to speak my mind. We smiled to each other. I thanked her for her kindness, and she sauntered off. I knew she liked me at the first moment we met, and at the next party a couple of days after, we made out. We were henceforth a couple, though only for a moment before I broke up with her. I'm quite annoyed with myself today that I never asked Marcus what he thought about all my objections to the feminist speaker. I'm sure he found it quite amusing. He probably regretted that the drama didn't go any further, and that it just sizzled out after I was told to shut up. Some men's chief enjoyment when in company is to watch other people get into a fight. They love nothing better, and when the conflict appears to abate, they might even fan the flames themselves with some innocent comment or suggestion. Others would cut off their little finger if it meant that harmony would be preserved in a group. Choose your friends wisely, my friend. But do speak out at assemblies, even if your opinions are shouted down and you become an object of hatred. You only need to impress one girl and voila, you have a girlfriend. Mahmoud and I were well matched at table soccer. We were quite similar in a lot of respects. He was also tall, somewhat skinny, and wore glasses. The only thing that was truly a contrast between us two was our skin color. I'm not sure why we became such good friends, and I don't even remember how our friendship started. I got quite familiar with him fast, and started shortening his name, calling him Maut instead of Mahmoud, trying to make my tongue click loudly when I said it. I thought it was funny, but he did not find it quite so amusing. At first he merely politely told me to stop calling him Maut, which didn't stop me from keep calling him that. It was only when he made it quite clear that it seriously pissed him off that I reluctantly reverted back to his true name. I think he was from Nigeria or something, but to be honest, all the African countries kind of blend into one for me. At least all the middle ones do, much like it is with the American states. The outliers always seem to be the most easily recognized, and the middle becomes a blur. Perhaps this is something common in all things. But let's not start philosophizing. One thing that was very different between us two was that Mahmoud did not look at porn, or at least hardly at all. This was not due to him being religious or not liking it. In fact, he confessed that he probably liked it too much. I found out why he forced himself to abstain one day when I came and visited him in his room. It took him forever to unlock the door after I had knocked, and when I entered the room I saw his laptop on his bed, with no programs or any windows open. If it were some hot videos you were masturbating to, can you send me the links? I jokingly said. I thought I observed his dark face becoming paler, though it was probably something I just fancied. Did you just turn pale? I continued. No, why are you saying that? And I did not look at porn. I don't like porn. I don't look at porn at all. And trying to change the subject, he said, and if you want to see someone pale, you should take a look in the mirror. You're so pale you look like a ghost, milk boy. Maybe I am a ghost, I said, and I have come to haunt and punish you for your sins. And what sins would that be? Mahmoud asked. Oh, the shame is written in your face. What filthy porn have you been looking at, Mahmoud? Then I said in a mock imperious tone, confess, or I will have you whipped, boy. Mahmoud and I used to pick on each other all the time, especially when it was just us two alone. Our difference in skin color was what we usually made fun of, though sometimes one of us might overstep the line, and by one of us I mean me. History drove a huge fault line between us, one which could not be ignored. It would probably have been more racist if we had just tried to ignore it all the time, acting like our colors didn't exist. We both knew it didn't really matter, yet it did. Unfortunately, we live in a world where things like that still matters for many people, and we were both aware of that fact, though perhaps not consciously. We both know who's the stronger of us two, Milky. And saying that, Mahmoud grabbed his towel that was hanging by the sink and began rolling it together. Just before the first blow struck me, I had grabbed Mahmoud's notebook and managed to block the blow by using it as a shield. Who's going to whip who now, Lazarus? Mahmoud said laughingly as I blocked most of his blows and suffered a few hits on my legs. Enough, enough! I yield, I laughed. He threw his towel on the sink and sat down in his bed. You were lucky I didn't have the dogs, I muttered, barely audible. He heard me though and glanced at his towel. You haven't had enough, he said. Enough warfare for today, Maud, I said. He scowled at me. I told you 1,000 times to not call me that. I'm sorry, I quickly said. I forgot it in the heat of the moment. I sat down on the bed next to him and grabbed his laptop. So you say you weren't looking at porn? I wonder what your internet history would tell me. Mahmoud smiled at that. You're welcome to look. You think that if I looked at porn, I would be so stupid to not be incognito? He said. Aha, so you admit that you were looking at porn? No, I did not. I already told you, I don't look at porn. Dude, Mahmoud, you can tell me if you do. There's no shame in it. I look at porn a lot, though it's kinda hard to find a moment alone here at Grundtvig's to do it, I confessed. Mahmoud was silent for a while. The thing is that I like porn, but I'm kinda scared looking at it. What is there to be afraid of? I asked him. The thing is, he started. Let's say I go to a random porn website and start looking at some hot girl sucking dick or getting fucked. How can I be sure she's actually 18 or older? I mean, what if she's actually 16 or 17? I would be breaking the law, and they could throw me in jail and call me a pedophile. I'm 20, and I prefer looking at girls around my own age. But how can I be sure they aren't actually underaged? I'd rather not risk it. That's why I try my best to avoid looking at porn. I don't want the police knocking at my door one day. At first, I didn't know what to reply to him. Then I said after a while, I don't think you have to be afraid. I mean, I use sites like RedTube that millions use. I don't think you have to worry at all about that. But it is breaking the law if she's under 18. So when I finally can't resist anymore and have to look at porn, I always force myself to watch mature porn. I would rather look at 20-year-old girls than 50-year-olds. But when looking at mature porn, I know I'm safe. Are you shitting me? You wank off to 50-year-old ladies? Dude, that's almost like wanking off to your mom. No, it's not, Mahmoud said. Dude, that is really weird, I exclaimed. It's not like I have a fetish for old people. That would be kinda sick, man. I only do it to be safe. You never know who's looking when you use the internet and what they could do to you. I actually could understand it better, I said, if you had a fetish for old people. I mean, then it would be kinda weird that you jack off to that kind of porn. Kinda like you secretly want to fuck your mom, I said. Stop with the mom thing already, Jesus Christ, stop talking about my mom, Mahmoud said angrily. Okay, fine, but if you rather look at younger girls, then do it, man. Don't be such a pussy. There are plenty of videos of hot 20-year-old girls you can look at. I have looked at thousands of such videos, and I have never had the cops knocking at my door. I even looked at a video once that I bookmarked, and when I came back a few weeks later, it had been removed. I'm not sure why it got removed though. But my point is, you're being paranoid. Better paranoid and free than being beat in jail and called a pedophile, Mahmoud muttered. Dude, you're not going to jail for looking at porn online. Anyway, the law is fucking stupid. Right now you can fuck a 17-year-old girl, and that is legal, allowed, fine, as long as she consents, of course, and that you aren't her teacher or some shit. But if you look at a video of a 17-year-old being fucked, then that is illegal, and you can be sent to jail. I mean, that makes no fucking sense. Mahmoud didn't say anything, he just shrugged his shoulders. If you're still really so afraid, I will even allow you to borrow my computer. Then you can watch normal porn on it, without being afraid, and not having to watch ladies that have had their menopause. I mean, don't get me wrong, some of them can be hot, but hey, you don't want to exclude older women younger than 40 years, I told him. I might actually take you up on that offer, Mahmoud said. Sure, just tell me. Just don't download any shit. I stick to the normal porn sites. Mahmoud smiled and clasped my hand. Thanks, my friend, he said. And Lazarus, one more thing. Please don't tell anyone about this. I never did, at least until now. Don't worry, and no problem. I can't have my friends looking at old ladies' porn, unless of course they prefer that kind of thing. Oh, and please don't get any nasty juice on my laptop. I will return your laptop looking as clean and innocent as the day it was assembled, Mahmoud pronounced solemnly. Perseus beheaded Medusa thousands of years ago, and the severed head still turned anyone who looked at it into stone. The head was finally given to Athena, who placed it on her shield. Today all trace of Medusa, Athena or the shield seems to have vanished, and merely looking at anything that exists today will not turn you into stone. Yet you must still beware of where your gaze wanders. Though you will not turn into stone, you may be turned into a stony prison, left there to rot in isolation. When merely looking at something is a crime, one must be careful and curb one's curiosity. Due to our laws, Athena's shield could be recreated today. Imagine if one were to print out a forbidden picture and put it in a box, then wander around, and when people ask, "What's in the box?" you answer, "Do you wish to see?" If they say yes, they have of their own free will seen the picture, and they must be turned into a stony prison. I'm amazed that the weapon hasn't been used in modern warfare yet. A shield with a forbidden picture could be made and used in battle against the enemy. The soldiers' own government would be forced to arrest and imprison all the surviving soldiers. Posterity will look at me as another Napoleon simply for this brilliant revolutionary idea that will change the fundamentals of warfare. Chapter 12. The Good Samaritans. Spring was upon us. Many were out in the yard, basking in the sun, smoking and drinking a cold beer. This was the time to strut one's feathers and attract the still many single ladies at the school. And so Lazarus was out in the yard, throwing an American football back and forth with the ever-shy Eric. We got tired of that pretty quickly though, and as my skin could only handle 50 minutes or so out in the weak Danish sun before burning, I convinced Eric that we should go inside again. He hardly needed any convincing. It had been a big deal for him to do something in front of so many people, and as we were walking inside, he was visibly agitated. "Let's go to the basement and see if there's still room for us in the game," I said. Eric made a barely perceptible nod and followed behind me as we headed down to the depths of the school. We had discovered a basement room with a television, and when Eric had returned from visiting his parents for a few days, he had brought along an Xbox and a bunch of controllers. Since then, you could walk down the basement at pretty much any time, and you could be fairly certain to encounter someone down there playing. It was the safe space for the nerds, though the cool kids did visit sometimes, and once the triumvirate even graced us with their visit. Marcus wasn't very good at Call of Duty though, which we were playing 4-way split screen, so he quickly became frustrated and cursed the underground enterprise. It was now no longer cool to be down here and play, which was fine by the rest of us, since we could get the basement to ourselves. Eric would get so engrossed in the games that he would completely forget his shyness, and he actually spoke during the games. It was actually really nice playing with him, and he didn't get angry and throw stuff like so many other people do. He would say things like, "Nice shot," and "Damn, I almost got you," when he died. He never complained when you killed him, and he didn't boast either when he killed you. He was naturally very good at the game compared to most people playing, since he had plenty of practice from home. Mahmoud was laughably bad at the game, and despite playing just as much as the rest of us, he would always end up being the one with least kills and most deaths. I teased him with this to no end. To my chagrin, he somehow got a lot better after a while. I suspect he practiced in secret. Maybe he was in cahoots with Eric, who he may have enlisted as his personal coach. But despite the skill of Eric and the progress of Mahmoud, I, your faithful and ever-true narrator, was undoubtedly the best player. I would sometimes play for hours without dying a single time, getting in hundreds of kills. Okay, that's not true, but I was pretty good at the game, especially considering I had not really played any Xbox games before. Hell, if I'm not good at something, I either get good or stop doing it altogether. Someone once praised me after reading a couple of the first pages of my Carthage. "You write well," she said. "Yes," I replied. She looked at me amused. "You were supposed to say thank you." But why should one say thank you? Hard work has gone into developing this skill. Before I began writing, I spent years trying to read some of the best writing ever put down. And before you ask, it is Moby Dick hands down. All the pages I have written so far have basically been an attempt to write with the style and spirit of the Dick in the 21st century. If you Google false modesty, Wiktionary gives a pretty good quote. Although having a large ego is considered undesirable, at times it is proper to take credit where it is due rather than display false modesty. Why else would I sit here in front of the screen at 43 minutes past midnight if I did not think I created something at least somewhat valuable? Though doubt does assail one now and then. What is this shit I wrote, and why are there so many dicks in my book? Should probably put some more no homos in here just for good measure. Yet pondering this and related matters deeply, my reflections lead me to surmise that it may be a great shame to go through life without having tried to suck dick at least once. The girl seems to like it, Too bad I'm too inflexible to suck my own. I wonder how many old people groan in their deathbeds in agony because of their regret of their abstinence on this matter. Anyway, Eric became less and less shy during our gaming sessions. We could now hold a conversation with him without feeling like we had to forcibly pull out answers from him. One conversation even led to a quest that me and Mahmoud embarked on enthusiastically. It started with Mahmoud needing to salvage his self-image after again getting crushed by both of us in the game. So naturally he began bragging about his many conquests, which were only 3, but we were still envious of him, both having no experiences to talk about. And so we fucked only a couple of hours after our date had started. Mahmoud said he had told us this story before, but perhaps had forgotten, or more likely he didn't care that we had heard it already. The third orgasm I gave her was so intense that she tried to push me away while she was coming. I kept fucking her, and she ended up shoving me out of the bed with all her might. Afterwards she described it as the best orgasm she had ever gotten. That's how you satisfy a woman, boys. As you may know, Lazarus. Oh wait, do you? You know I'm still a virgin, I said. And we heard your big dick fuck long time story before. Congrats on getting laid. Yet how long is it since you last had sex? Oh yeah, I remember. 9 months, you said. That's quite a dry period for a player like you. I'm sure the women are the ones most lamenting the fact that 9 months have passed without such a stallion having been mounted. I've only just arrived at the school, Mahmoud replied. Just give it a little time, and I'll soon surpass Martin. Is it 6 girls he has slept with so far? 7 actually, I think, I said. And keep dreaming you're going to surpass that. Just wait and see, Mahmoud said. You have been here at the school for what, 3 months now? And you haven't been with a girl here at the school? How is that even possible? Star-crossed love, I said. Not the kind that leads to wild sex and then tragedy, but rather the kind that leaves one person sighing and the other shrugging. Well, at least you tried with Helen. But you're over it now, aren't you? Yeah, sure, I said, not sure myself if I was telling the truth or not. Well, perhaps you are a virgin, Eric suddenly broke in. But at least you have had a girlfriend. We both stopped playing and looked at Eric. He was always very quiet when we talked about girls, remaining completely silent, so this sudden interjection astounded us both. I mean, I'm also 19 years old like you, Eric continued, and I never had a girlfriend. He looked down at his huge feet and started turning very red. I never even kissed a girl. Eric said no more, but kept staring either at his shoes or the screen. Both of us didn't quite know what to say, and I was nervous that Mahmoud might say something inconsiderate. That is not something to be ashamed of, really, I began. Lots of guys our age haven't done much, and many haven't even done anything at all. Only a few have the guts to admit it, though. Cheer up, Mahmoud said, slapping Eric on the shoulder. You will get a girlfriend someday. Just wait, you aren't a bad-looking guy. You just need to stop being so shy and start talking to some girls. The thing is, Eric started, and then fell silent again. We waited patiently. After a minute or so, he quietly started talking again. The thing is that I can't talk to girls. I just freeze completely. I just try to force myself to say something, but I can't even take the first step and just walk towards them. I just end up standing completely stiff, staring in that direction. And if they then notice me standing like that, they must think I am a creep or something. Anyway, I don't know. If that happens, I'm walking away from them as quickly as possible. Then I hate myself afterwards for being so awkward and cowardly. I had no idea what to say to this, and Mahmoud was at a loss for words as well. Eric had buried his face in his hands and was now sobbing quietly. Finally, Mahmoud went over to Eric, grabbed his hands and uncovered his face. Eric looked at Mahmoud pitifully, but was no longer crying. It doesn't have to be this way, Mahmoud told him. It's just the first step that is hard. Then it gets much easier. We will help you, won't we, Lazarus? I cleared my throat and then said, Yeah, sure, we'll be your wingman. Help you get used to approaching girls. It's true, it's the first step that is the most difficult. We just gotta help you over it, and you will learn quickly. Eric pulled his hands away from Mahmoud and drew back a bit. I don't know, he said. I don't think I can do that. Just forget about it. I'm okay. Nonsense, Mahmoud said. We don't mind at all. Hell, Lazarus might even learn something from me as we teach you, and I can practice a few tricks. Like I can learn anything from you, I told Mahmoud. Most of the girls you fucked have been really drunk, and so have you. I doubt your memory is even reliable when you talk about how you hooked up with them. Alcohol helps things along, he admitted, but my fundamentals are solid. That's what really matters. And I'm more qualified to teach Eric than you are anyway, but I could still use your help. I think neither of us are the best teacher for Eric, but we are better than nothing. I turned to Eric. Maybe you just need a couple of guys that got your back and encourages you, and it will be much easier. Eric was still not convinced. Listen guys, I really appreciate it, I really do, but I just can't, not like this, not right now at least, some other time. Nonsense, Mahmoud said. We don't mind helping you at all, it is no trouble. You will thank us later when you're getting your dick. Well, you will thank us later. Guys, it's not a good, Eric insisted, now stammering. I cut him off. We insist, you will try at least, and to make sure you are in good hands, I'll get the best guy for the job to oversee your education. I will talk to Martin. He's a good guy, a gentleman in fact. He won't tell the other guys, and we sure won't either. It will be our secret. If I get him on board, we will make a bad boy of you in no time. Eric finally relented to our peer pressure, and we all ascended the cellar in search of Martin. Chapter 13. Day Gaming. Crash and burn. Never forget that. That is the first and most important thing you need to understand. Say it 3 times, Eric. Eric looked at him skeptically, then sighed. Crash and burn, he said monotonously. Crash and burn, crash and burn. Good, now it is imprinted in your mind, he continued, beaming at Eric. Every time you approach a girl, you say those words. You expect crash and burn, and if you crash and burn, that is fine. You're trying to land an airplane in the fucking mountains, you see? It's insanely difficult. It's gonna be crash and burn. Nobody will blame you if you crash the airplane and all the passengers and you die. Nobody will laugh. Most of them don't even know how to fly. They're too afraid to even try it. Don't care what they think or say. Same when you approach a girl you never met before. You go up to a girl, she's in a bad mood, she doesn't like your nose. 3 guys have already been trying to hit on her, etc, etc. Doesn't fucking matter, you see. You crash and burn, and then you move on. It had not taken a lot of persuasion to convince Martin to coach Eric in the whole girls thing. He had apparently coached other guys before, and said it was his pleasure to do it. Guys should help each other, he explained, and it was also a shame that so many girls lacked a guy simply because many guys were shy and socially awkward. What if you land? Mahmoud asked. Doesn't matter if you land. Don't be result-orientated, Martin explained. If you do land, that's great, but expect crash and burn, and you won't be disappointed. Okay, I get it, Eric said. What else? That's about it, Martin replied. Then you just talk to her, and for God's sake don't do cheesy pickup lines like, you must have fallen from the sky because you look like an angel, or shit like that. Just say whatever feels natural. And what if nothing feels natural? What if I become completely blank and can't think of anything? Eric asked. I'm sure you will think of something. Just don't panic. I don't know. Can you tell me something I should say? I can't just walk up to a girl and say hi, and then she says hello, and then I don't know what to say, Eric said. Martin rubbed his closely shaved beard, which was really well kempt and didn't grow in weird patches like mine did. Okay, I'll give you this line to get you started. When you go talk to a girl you don't know, go to her and then say, hello, my name is Eric. I think you look cute, so I thought I would come and say hello. What is your name and how are you doing? Say that, and then I can't say what next. You gotta react to what she says, you know, a normal conversation. Eric repeated the line a couple of times. And don't worry if you mess it up. Crash and burn, remember? Okay, I think we're ready now to start. Enough theoretical stuff for today. Now we gotta put you in the field. Make you get some experience. Eric turned pale, but we all insisted. We went out to the nearby supermarket and instructed Eric to approach any girl around his age and introduce himself. We stood in a corner nearby, pretending to talk together, but actually observing Eric's attempt at talking to a girl. After a rather long wait, a girl finally came by. It was Annie, who had gone to get some supplies. We didn't want him to talk to the girls at the school yet, but before we could stop him, he had already went up to her. Now, she actually wasn't such a bad girl for Eric to talk to. She was single and had not even kissed any guy at the school yet. Furthermore, she was a nice, sweet girl, though unfortunately rather homely. Eric went to her and greeted her, though he did it rather too loudly. Hello, my name is Eric. I think you look cute, so I thought I would come and say hello. What is your name, and how are you doing? Annie looked at him puzzled. What? I know your name's Eric. Is this a joke? She said. Or some kind of experiment? We live a few meters away from each other. You should know my name by now. She looked around, and then saw us staring at them. She became furious. What the fuck are you guys up to? She shouted at us, dropped her cookies, and then stormed off. Eric was left alone, completely dumbfounded. Martin hurried over to him. Crash and burn, Eric, crash and burn. Don't mind it. And for the next time, don't use that line with girls you already know. That line is for complete strangers. But no matter, no matter. The next couple of attempts didn't go much better. Eric just said hi and asked them how they were doing, but froze up afterwards and didn't know what to say. One girl even laughed at him and walked away. Martin went into the tank and mulled things over. He told me and Mahmoud that he hadn't had such a hopeless student before, but he refused to give up on Eric. We have to start from scratch. Actually, before scratch. That's where we start, Martin finally told us. Okay, fine, I said. So what are we going to do then? Old people, Martin replied. Old people? Mahmoud repeated. Yeah, old people. We gotta start him on old people. They love to talk and nobody wants to talk to them. They're also kind, at least most of them are. They sit everywhere with their cane or whatever. We will go to the town with Eric, and then we will find an old person and make Eric talk to him. Hell, all Eric needs to do is sit next to the person on the bench, and the guy is sure to tell Eric his life story. When we told Eric of the new plan, he just nodded. I think he was relieved that we wouldn't force him to go up and talk to girls anymore. And so, a couple of days later, when the weather was decent, we four took a trip to the nearby city. Eric's instructions were simple. Find an old person sitting alone, sit next to the person, talk to him or her. But it was also important he didn't stay too long. Eric was able to be a lot less shy once he had gotten to know a person, but the first 15 minutes or so he was incredibly awkward with a stranger. So we told him not to talk with the same person for more than 15 minutes. He was noticeably less nervous when talking to a senior than with a girl. After talking to more than 5 strangers, he actually seemed to start enjoying meeting a new person. He would come back afterwards to us with a smile on his face and then tell us some cool thing he had been told. It was a great success. We ended up doing a couple of trips with Eric, and we gradually expanded the category of people he should talk to. He didn't only just talk to old people anymore. Now he began to talk to anyone. He still got really nervous though when he talked to the scariest category of them all, girls his age. But he didn't come off as awkward as before, having little after little gained quite a lot of experience in how to talk to strangers. At one point he even managed to get a girl to laugh. Not at him, mind you, but actually at something he said. And when Eric was saying goodbye to her, the girl volunteered to give him her number. Eric was ecstatic when he came back to us, and Martin was beaming at him. When the girl was safely out of sight, we all gave him high fives and clapped him on the shoulder. My work here is done, Martin said solemnly. You are now ready to be on your own, Eric. And then Martin rather strangely just ran off. The rest of us went to the bus stop to get back to the school, and Martin was standing there. Why did you run off? Mahmoud asked him. Eric didn't seem to notice much, but just stood staring in awe at the piece of paper he had gotten. I don't know, Martin said. Just felt it was the right thing to do, and just went with my flow, he said. A few moments of silence passed, where me and Mahmoud just looked at him. Whoosh, Martin added randomly. Mahmoud and I looked at each other and just shrugged. We all felt pretty good today. We couldn't keep pushing him forever, but now we had given Eric all the confidence and experience that he needed to continue on his own. Chapter 14. Mette. The next couple of days, after our initial conversation at the soccer table, I had been flirting with Mette, or rather she had been flirting with me. The costume party Friday turned out to be the big day. I went looking for clothes to wear in the basement together with Mahmoud, and we both managed to find some suits. So that night I wore a blazer and sweatpants. I hardly need to mention that Marcus was not pleased with this combo, and some other guys even remarked on the unorthodoxy of this mix of clothing. But Helen intervened on my behalf, saying that she thought it was kinda cool. I ended up sitting next to Mette and talked to her for a long time, and around midnight, after we had both had a few beers, she was lying in my arms, looking expectantly into my eyes. She later told me that she had been somewhat frustrated that night that I had not kissed her earlier. "And finally you kissed me. I've been waiting for hours," she told me laughingly as we were cuddling in bed a few weeks after. Years later, when I started going on Tinder dates, I veered to the extreme opposite kissing timing. I would often kiss the girls an hour or so after we had met, and while we were still in a public space. I had read somewhere that you should always try to kiss the girl on the first date, and so I aimed to do that. I even ignored her body language and just tried to kiss her even though she hardly looked in my direction or faced me for more than a few seconds. If someone had filmed and done a compilation with some of those kiss attempts, it would probably be in top 10 all time in Reddit cringe. But I learned, and today, after more than 50 Tinder dates, I'm so confident on what to do from meet to fuck that a few months ago I was very close to writing a Tinder date guide on Reddit. But better late than never, and so I leaned towards Mette, though I did not need to move much as she was already very much in my face. The paparazzi was ready, having waited patiently for at least half an hour, predicting the kiss to come. At the school it was the custom at a party to get as many pictures as possible of people when they hooked up. After each party, people would look at the pictures together, and if someone had made out at the party, they could expect to provide the background of many of the pictures. It became a thing to take as many pictures and make sure the slobbering couple would be in the background. To avoid this fate, we only kissed shortly among the others that night, and I managed to block the cameras with my hand while I kissed Mette. After having kissed her, I felt jubilant and even went out barefoot in the snow for some reason. After that day, we were a couple. But not long after I hooked up with her, I started thinking about how not being single would make me more attractive to the other girls at the school. My self-confidence became severely inflated, and I imagined every girl at the school having a secret crush on me, craving my hidden member. But alas, they would sigh, Lazarus the handsome prince is already in a relationship. I have no chance. And so I started thinking that they may think. I even imagined Helen would fall for me now. I was that deluded. Maybe I'm just not suited for a monogamous relationship. Maybe I'm polyamorous. I don't know. Maybe I missed the rush of having to seduce someone. Perhaps it is a sort of validation of myself I feel when I first have sex with someone. All I know is that in all the relationships I have had, I have quickly felt somewhat trapped. The one that worked best and for the longest was an open relationship. For the main part during that relationship, I didn't fuck anyone else, but just knowing that I could have a fling with someone else was very liberating. I was honest and open from the start, and the girl I was with accepted it. The hardest part for her was probably how her friends reacted when she told them. It was not a very positive reaction. She had a friend that had a very dysfunctional relationship with her boyfriend, and yet that friend would often berate her for my promiscuous attitude, and for the fact that we were not in a normal, closed, one-on-one relationship. It will all end in tears. Probably already has. And Mette and my relationship certainly ended in tears. Though if I cry, it is always very long after the relationship has ended. But before the tears, I lost my virginity, so at least that shame went away. And I'm sure you will rejoice to hear, once I got comfortable with Mette, all my anxieties about blood and the lack thereof in my penis went away. I proudly confess I got erections in her presence, and maintained them for an adequate amount of time. Yes, very sexy. I'm sure you have been wondering when I would begin talking about my favorite topic again. One of the unexpected benefits of having a girlfriend was that both Marcus and Hassan didn't dare make fun of me anymore. None of them had a girlfriend, and no longer could Marcus argue that I needed genes to get a girl interested in me. Hassan even came into my room one day to make another "Arise, Lazarus, arise" joke. Yet when he saw that I was with Mette, he stopped mid-sentence and became very respectful. He had come to command me to some cleaning job I apparently had not performed satisfactorily. "Oh, never mind," he almost stammered. "I didn't mean to interrupt. Just do it whenever you can, that's fine." And saying thus, he quickly left the room. So when Mette was with me, I had a safe haven. One thing bothered me about Mette, however, and that was that she had a very faint mustache. I only noticed it after we had been together for a week or so, but what has been seen cannot be unseen. Maybe I should have just told her straight away, since it really wasn't that big of a deal, and could be fixed in 30 seconds with a razor. But I didn't, and so I had to try hard not to look at it, and not to make it bother me. Perhaps I should inform you that for the past few years, I had been struggling with body hair. Not my own hair, that is, but small fine hair on attractive ladies. Why it is that those small fine feminine hairs bothers me so, I do not really know. and I'm also in doubt whether or not I'm just being squeamish and ridiculous, or that my dislike is somehow justified. I didn't care whether or not Mette had hair under her arm or not. Both works fine with me. Same with all other areas of the body. I'd rather see hair on her leg than small red razor bumps that appears painful and uncomfortable. Now, a moustache on a woman is usually very hard to see, so you usually only notice it once you actually become so close you are way up in each other's face. But then I notice and wring my hands. And then some problems present themselves. Besides the one where I'm wondering whether or not I'm being sexist and a dick because it bothers me. First of all, I wonder why it seems that girls do not notice it. They may fuss over having completely perfect eyebrows with not one hair out of place, yet they do not notice that they have a mustache. And then the final question confronts me, and that is, should I tell Mette? I'm not going to tell a stranger, but only if we have become good friends. After the Mette debacle, I have chosen to very carefully mention the moustaches to a few girls, and the reaction from them have always been to immediately cover it up with their hands and then express surprise that I have noticed it. They afterwards proceed to shave it to my satisfaction, but those nights I toss and turn in bed, bathed in my own cold sweat, wondering, am I being a dick? Can it be compared to telling a guy that his eyebrows has grown together, something which is frowned upon by pretty much everyone in Western culture? That is, the eyebrows growing together, not informing a person of that fact. It's not like that I'm, for example, telling them that they have a big nose or that they talk funny, something that can be argued is more essentially part of them. It is something that can be easily removed, but should it? Should all people just start to accept all their body hair? I make sure my eyebrows don't grow together, trim my nasal hair, which otherwise would start growing out of my nose, and every 4th day or so I shave, since I have been cursed with the facial hair of a 14-year-old boy. My facial hair grows in patches. In patches, for God's sake. I realized that there is no God once I started growing facial hair. Mette was a very sweet girl, and it was nice spending time together. Yet I kept being bothered by small things, like the painting she had of herself when she was 13, which was done by her little sister or someone like that, and was god-awful ugly. It reminded me of a South Park episode where an ugly girl is made beautiful in Photoshop, and when the guys from her class sees the picture, she suddenly becomes the most sought after girl in class. I think that painting on the wall had the opposite effect on me. I tried to casually mention the picture, but never dared straight out tell her that I wish she would take it down. I wondered if the other girls told Mette that they either knew or suspected that I was a virgin. I found out that this was common knowledge among them before we hooked up. When the new people came to the school, we had to do a get to know each other exercise. We sat in groups, and then we had to write down 3 truths and invent 1 lie about our life. When we had done this, the other people in the group had to guess which one was the lie. When the game had been explained, and people had to type down the 3 facts and 1 lie, most people just stared blankly into space, not sure what to write down. I quickly thought about something, however, and began to write it down, while all the others in my group were still thinking. 2 girls who had also been at the school for 3 months, though I had hardly spoken to either of them, were in the group. They noticed that I had quickly thought about something. One of them looked at the other and then said, "I have never." The other girl burst out laughing, though she quickly tried to restrain herself. The meaning of this was not lost on me. They either knew I was a virgin or thought I was. The meaning of her joke was that I was writing, "I have never had sex," as one of my truths. I didn't respond to her remark, but instead just did my best to ignore it. I was kinda embarrassed about the fact that I was still a virgin, but that was not what bothered me most when it came to sex. I was extremely anxious whether or not I could achieve a hard-on and stay hard when the moment to perform came. I did not want girls to mistake my nervousness for impotence, and then perhaps the girl would tell the whole school that I couldn't get it up, and I would be a laughingstock. I mean, I don't really hold grudges or anything. They surely didn't mean to hurt or offend me, and the fact of the matter... Nah, to hell with being polite. Fuck those 2 laughing bitches. Chapter 15. The Offer. It didn't take long for Mahmoud to take me up on my offer. His roommate was home for the weekend, and he wondered if he could borrow my laptop for the next couple of days. "If you don't mind, that is," he said, smiling nervously. "Sure, go ahead," I said. "Go wild. Just keep the keyboard and display clean." Thanks. I'll bring up my laptop later. As long as you don't use it for porn, you can do whatever you like. There's no need, I assured him. I don't mind being off the grid for a couple of days. It's liberating, and I just started reading Blood Meridian. I found it in the library. It's really something special. It's probably the most violent. Mahmoud cut me off here. He had been shuffling back and forth impatiently. Some other time I'll hear about it, but I really gotta go now. He smiled mischievously and began turning away. Somewhat offended by his curtness, I nevertheless quickly paid him for his insolence. "Be gone, heathen!" I shouted after him as he was leaving the room, loud enough so everybody in the hall could hear it. "Enough of your infernal voodoo tricks. Your pagan gods have no sway where the truth reigns," I continued, barely able to keep my voice mock serious. And so I got the last word, but as I continued reading, I was suddenly hit in my forehead by a foul-smelling object. Mahmoud had taken one of his dirty socks off, and with expert marksmanship tainted my temple of reason with that most unworthy of objects. "Surety for the laptop, Lazarus," he laughed, skipping away down the hall. When he returned a few days later with my laptop, he looked satiated, but also a bit guilty. "The laptop looks clean enough," I said. How was it looking at normal porn again? Mahmoud almost threw the laptop on my bed. "Yeah, thanks," he said, awaiting the question. "Listen, can we not talk about this anymore? And don't tell it to anyone else." "What's the big secret? You looked at normal porn. Everybody does that," I answered. "Yeah, I made sure I deleted all the stuff I downloaded, so don't worry." "Wait, you downloaded stuff on my laptop? I thought you were just gonna look at videos online. I didn't give you permission to download all kinds of junk on my laptop," I said. "Well, sorry, but I have deleted it all, so don't." "What programs did you use to download the porn?" I said, cutting him off. "Why does that matter? I got some websites and used Kazaa for the rest," Mahmoud said. "You use Kazaa to download porn on my computer? Are you crazy? There's all kinds of shit on Kazaa, and I even heard some of it is being put out by the police as bait to catch people." I sighed. "Well, at least just tell me you're sure all the stuff you downloaded is legal." Mahmoud looked down and began shuffling his feet. "Well, I don't know, man. I can't be sure." He began to get defensive. "That's why I don't look at this shit. I told you. You never should have tempted me with your laptop. I was happy and satisfied with my mature women until you came along with your supposed kindness." I began to say something angry in reply, but decided to restrain myself. "Whatever, man," I said somewhat calmly. "Just know that I'm not gonna take the fall for you if the police comes knocking. I'll tell them you used my laptop, and I have witnesses. Eric knows that you have borrowed the laptop for a couple of days." "What? You said I could use your laptop for porn and use it anonymously," Mahmoud said. "Yeah, to look at porn, not download it down on my laptop, and even downloading it from fucking Kazaa." "But what does it matter now? I deleted it all. It's gone. There's no proof." He tried to give me a reassuring smile. "You fool. You can't delete a file off your computer. Even though you can't see it, it will always be there, and they can always retrieve it," I told him confidently. "Oh shit," Mahmoud said. He was starting to panic, and I could see sweat beads on his furrowed black brow. "We gotta do something, man." He began reaching for the laptop, but I was quicker than him. "You gotta give me the laptop, Lazarus," he pleaded. "I don't want to go to prison. We gotta destroy it. Then they can't prove anything. Please, man. I'll give you mine in return. Just let me get rid of it." His eyes were now glistening from the tears that were starting to form. "Oh, stop being so hysterical," I told him. "Anyway, I don't want your shitty laptop. It's all right that you looked at the stuff, whatever. Probably it was all legal stuff anyway, so it's fine. And if there was some shit in there, who cares? I'm pretty sure nothing will happen," I said, trying to calm him. It didn't seem to have much of an effect. "Anyway, it's really silly," I continued. "I mean, I can fuck a 15-year-old no problem, but I can't watch a video of a 17-year-old girl getting fucked. I mean, that's one fucked up law." Mahmoud was still staring intently at my laptop, biting his lip. He seemed to ponder whether or not he could successfully snatch it from my arms. "Come on, man, don't worry so much. Be above all that stuff. Be an Übermensch or whatever. Don't be such a pussy," I said. "I'm not joking, Lazarus," he said, now looking determined and dead serious. "Either you hand me the laptop, or I'll take it by force. I can't gamble with this shit. I'm stronger than you, and you know it." "Mahmoud, if you think you're gonna get this laptop, you're truly mistaken. Man, just take it easy and relax for a moment. But Mahmoud didn't let me finish. He suddenly lunged at me and the laptop I was holding. He undoubtedly would have wrested it free presently if we had not attracted the whole hall with our scuffle and my angry shouts. We were separated, and I had managed to hold on to my laptop. Danny was warning us that we could get thrown out if the teachers found us fighting each other. Furious and exasperated with Mahmoud, I told them all to leave my room, and they had to pretty much drag Mahmoud out while he was desperately pleading with me. "Lazarus, wait! For God's sake, Lazarus, we have to get rid of it! Lazarus!" Mahmoud shouted, beside himself. I had never seen him like this before. I ignored the questions about what had happened and just brushed them off with some vague answers. After making sure that Mahmoud hadn't left any videos, I thought that was probably good enough, and now was mainly concerned with how I could calm Mahmoud down and make him stop worrying about the whole silly episode. I expected to be able to reassure Mahmoud at dinner, but the place where he usually sat was empty. I first thought that he had just chosen somewhere else to sit tonight, but after carefully scanning all the tables, I realized that he was nowhere to be seen. Was he really that angry that he didn't even want to come down for dinner? I began to feel a creeping suspicion that Mahmoud was up to something. But my laptop was safely locked inside my room, and the only ones who had the keys were me and Danny. I had made sure to lock the door when I left, even pulling down the handle several times just to be absolutely certain. Scanning the crowd again quickly, I found Danny. "Danny," I said, tapping him on the shoulder. "How long ago is it since you were up in our room? And did you lock the door when you left?" "What? Why are you asking me?" he said. "I have just come from there, and no, I haven't locked the door. We agreed that that wasn't necessary, remember?" But I didn't hear his last question, since I was already hurrying away. When I got to my room, the door was indeed unlocked, and all that was to be seen of my laptop was the power cable. I was sure it was Mahmoud who had taken it, but I had no idea where he had gone. As I was contemplating what to do, I looked out the window and happened to see a dark figure carrying something, moving towards the setting sun in the direction of the forest. My room was on the 3rd floor, so I had to run down the stairs as fast as I could, and then around the whole building to arrive at where I had last seen what I was sure was Mahmoud. When I came to where I had seen him, he was completely gone. I hurried towards the forest, intent on saving my laptop from my friend's wild paranoia. I stumbled through the forest for almost an hour before I finally found Mahmoud. He was on his knees, shoveling earth into a little hole with his bare hands. A fist-sized stone with strange marks lay on the ground next to him. "Dude, are you serious?" I said. Mahmoud turned around startled, still on his knees. The surprise on his face was only momentary, and was quickly replaced by calmness. "Hello, Lazarus. I'm sorry about this, but it's done." In a few quick movements, he scooped the last earth into the hole and patted it down neatly. "It is buried and done." He stood up. "Why speak about it? I will buy you a new." "I don't want a new laptop," I sputtered, feeling the anger surge up in me. "It's my goddamn laptop, and you can't just steal it and bury it." I walked over towards the grave, expecting him to offer resistance. He allowed himself to be pushed aside and sat down calmly a few meters away from me. "It doesn't matter if you dig it up. It's done, Lazarus. How many times do I have to say it?" I ignored him and began digging, expecting the laptop to be dirty, but still relatively unscathed. After a minute or so, I uncovered the laptop. If you are a fellow nerd, you can sympathize with the truly horrendous spectacle that I witnessed. My computer had been damaged beyond repair, having been smashed several times with the fist-sized stone. The cables the rock had exposed had been torn out as much as Mahmoud could. I will save the listener further horrifying details. Furious, I pulled the laptop out of the hole and threw it in front of Mahmoud. "Listen, Lazarus," Mahmoud began again. "I couldn't have the laptop lying around. It incriminated me, the both of us. If you had only—" "You know what you are?" I shouted at him, besides myself with anger and indignation. "You are a nigger, that's what you are, a fucking nigger." Mahmoud blinked in surprise. "Don't call me that, man," he said, raising his voice. "Don't fucking call me that again." "I'll call you whatever the fuck I think you are, and what you deserve to be called," I said, moving closer to him and spraying spittle in his face. "I'm warning you," Mahmoud hissed, his fist clenching and his jaw tightening. "We are friends, but don't fucking—" I laughed. "And you know that's not even all of it. You aren't just a nigger. You are a nigger pedophile. A fucking nigger pedo—" I felt a blinding pain in my face and heard a crunching sound as my nose was smashed against my face. Everything went blank. When I woke up again, I wasn't sure how much time had passed. I was lying on my back. It was twilight, and the sky was dark red, though probably less red than what I expected my face to be. To my surprise, Mahmoud was leaning over me, cleaning my face with an already completely blood-stained paper towel. "Oh, you are awake?" he said nervously, looking into my eyes. "Listen, I'm sorry about that, about this whole thing." I sat up, carefully feeling my nose, expecting to be able to feel the blood flow, but all I felt was a little stickiness and a lot of pain. "The bleeding has pretty much stopped," Mahmoud said. "Listen, No, you listen," I said, gritting my teeth to cope with the pain. "I'm terrible. I shouldn't have said all those things to you. I take them all back." Mahmoud smiled. "Well, I certainly shouldn't have hit you, and your laptop." I waved my hand in front of me, cutting him off. "You were right to hit me. It was the only proper response to the shit I said. We're even now." He laughed and clapped me on my back. "I'll accept your apology," he beamed. "And about the laptop, can you forgive me for that?" "I guess I have to," I sighed. "Though you are one crazy bastard. I'll tell you that, Mahmoud." "I'm nowhere near half as crazy as you, milkman. Here, just hold your nose up, and the last of the blood will stop flowing. It looks pretty bad, but hopefully it's not broken." Before we left the scene, I took out my phone and shone a light on the laptop. "You smashed it pretty well, but did you even get to the hard drive? That's where your attention should have been focused, not the goddamn screen." I examined it closer. "Ah man, you barely even scratched the hard drive. Get that rock. You might as well do the job properly, since my laptop is already broken beyond anything. Kinda annoying I have to install all my games and stuff again, but a tabula rasa might not be too bad." Mahmoud finished his job on my laptop, doing it properly now with my guidance. Afterwards he buried the laptop again. "Ashes to ashes, dirt to dirt," I intoned solemnly. "Thou hast already been resurrected once. Now lie still and be forgotten until kingdom come. Amen." In the gloom we walked back to the school. I leaned on Mahmoud, and that worthy, though paranoid friend continually asked if it hurt, if I was all right, and if I wanted to take a short break. When we were almost back at the school, I suddenly started laughing. Mahmoud looked at me with a puzzled smile. "What is it? What's so funny?" "You know, Mahmoud, I told you you could borrow the laptop, not bury it." Chapter 16. The Loss. The nose wasn't broken, just badly bruised, and regarding the numerous inquiries directed at me the next day, to one and all I responded that I fell down the stairs, not caring if they believed me or not. I didn't even tell Mette the truth. I actually broke up with Mette not long after the laptop episode. It was the day after she got really drunk at a party. I think we had been together for a month or so. Even though we had been together for so long, we had only gotten to third base, and even that was not easy. "I have not come to this school to suck dick," she protested. She often came to my room, but I was usually listening to an audiobook or music, and so regrettably many times I did not hear her knocking on my door. For some reason I never went down to her room, and I only saw it when I put her to bed the night she got wasted. I'm not sure actually why I broke up with her. That night at the party was very weird. Perhaps she was angry at me, because the last week I probably had not been as nice as a boyfriend as I should have been. Maybe she wanted to make me jealous of her. Anyway, that night she talked mainly with Mahmoud, who sat next to me. She seemed more interested in him, and even flirted with him, I think. And she drank so much that we finally had to drag her to bed. I guess I was angry at her that she had made a scene, and that she seemed to actually prefer Mahmoud to me. The next day I said I wanted to talk to her, and told her we shouldn't be together anymore. One may accuse me of using her as a stepping stone. I shall remain silent in court, neither pleading guilty nor defend myself. After we were no longer together, I expected that there would be general rejoicing among the girls, because now Lazarus was available. I hardly need to tell you this was not the case. The exception might be Annie, who had liked me from the start, though she may have either gotten over me or simply given up on me by now. But I was not interested in her, to put it mildly. At least a kinda cute tall girl asked me a couple of weeks after, straight up, if I wanted to fuck her. I politely declined, not being confident in the valves of blood in my nether region. Oh, and some other girl who was okayish looking and very drunk also made advances on me. It was not very smooth, actually the least smooth flirting I have ever experienced from a girl. Close to midnight, as the party was winding down, I was sitting at a table with some other people. She came up to me, said, "Hey, Lazarus," and then put one leg on a chair and ran her hand along it. It was very weird. I just said hi and then nothing else happened. Good times, good times. But Lazarus, you may ask, how on earth did you manage to lose your virginity at the school when you broke up with Mette and you didn't have the balls to show your balls to any other devochkas? Well, my dear faithful droogs, all in due time. Fuck it, let's just talk about it now. No moment is as good as the present. In plain language, pretty please, you interject before I get to say another word, and I smile and I nod my head and strain my utmost to satisfy your wish. Well, first of all, I didn't show my balls to anyone else. Though one time a girl did notice my half-aroused member through my pants, but that doesn't count. Thus, as I'm sure you have already deduced, I ended up making a home run with Mette. Intercourse, you see. They say the longest lasting relationships are those where you have broken up once, but then gotten together again. Well, we did break up and ended up hooking up again, but the second time lasted even shorter than the first. You see, I started to miss her once we had been separated for a couple of weeks, and I pathetically begged her to take me back. She held out for quite a while, but finally she gave in. And then we had sex. I managed to put the condom on the right way, and since she had already seen I was capable of getting and maintaining an erection, I wasn't really nervous. But we were only together for a couple of weeks after that. My parents had invited me to a museum visit in Copenhagen, and I thought Mette might as well come too. We had been together the whole day before we went to the museum, and I had told Mette that I might want some time alone when we went there. I just kinda wanted to walk around by myself. I guess I felt I had been too social and needed some time off. Well, the outcome was that Mette felt that I avoided her the entire museum trip. And even when we sometimes looked at stuff together, I would suddenly walk off away from her. You didn't stay very close to her, my mother rebuked me later. And when we were outside and it began to rain, you just ran away from her and us. You didn't seem to like her that much. And when we sat down to watch the movie at the museum, you didn't sit right next to her. There was a chair between you two. I don't think there was a chair between us when we sat down, but other stuff is true. I don't know, it was a disaster, and I feel like a horrible person when I think about the whole episode. I made Mette feel like shit at the museum trip. I don't know why that was. Maybe I just really needed to be mostly alone. Maybe I'm just too awkward when I introduce a girlfriend to my parents. I hate showing emotions in front of them. I wonder why that is. Anyway, she broke up with me shortly after that. I remember feeling relieved, since at the time I again felt sort of caged in this exclusive monogamous relationship. I almost did the dancing in the rain shuffle when I was alone after she broke up with me. But then a couple of months later, I was thinking about her as the one that got away, as if happiness would be ensured if I could only get her back. I began to romanticize the past, to forget all the negative emotions I felt then. I wish I wasn't so indifferent of the present, and so fond of a mythic past. She was a really nice girl, and I wish we could still be friends. But she doesn't want to talk to me anymore. She wants to forget me completely, which is fair enough, I guess. Perhaps I really only want her back so I can redeem myself. Right now, when I think about her, I feel like a bad person. A person you meet, get to know really well, and then you realize you never want to meet again in your life. That is a harsh reality to live with, knowing that someone feels that way about you. Though of course it might not be like that. Maybe she just loved me too much and I didn't love her back enough, and that is why, and so on. I think all this would have been avoided if we could have been in a non-exclusive relationship. Then I wouldn't have felt trapped, and maybe I would have appreciated her more when we were together. But such an open relationship brings a whole new set of troubles, and I doubt she would even have considered such an option a possibility. I feel like the most healthy way to think of this whole debacle is a saying I once heard from a very skilled and wise man who was at the top of his game. He said, "Laughing my fucking ass off, who cares, haha, XD." Words to live by ultimately when contemplating a past that cannot be changed. A few days after the museum visit, she may have given me one last chance. Mette texted me that she was outside around a campfire with a bunch of other people and asked me to come, but I was sick with a cold. I just told her I'd rather stay in my room, and I don't know, maybe she thought I just wanted her for the sex. You can gather how our relationship was mainly kept to my room from this little anecdote. It was actually kind of funny what happened at one of the last days before the glorious folk high school experience ended. A mutual friend of both of us became completely flabbergasted when I told him I had been together with Mette. I think he had liked Mette as well and had not guessed at all that we had been intimate. My mood was also somewhat helpful right after our second breakup, with Mette now dumping me. We were out running together and I complained to Mahmoud about our most recent breakup. I told him I didn't really understand it. Mahmoud slowed down to a jog. "And you finally had sex this time, right?" he asked. "Yeah, a couple of times," I replied. "Did you give her an orgasm?" he said bluntly. "What? Why does that matter? I don't know, man." "Well, if you don't know," Mahmoud laughed, "I'm pretty sure you didn't. You gotta give it to her good and try to make sure she comes before you do. Get her addicted to it, and she's easy to keep. Be nice to her and be a gentleman, but be a devil in the bedroom, man." I shrugged and picked up the pace, but I think I took the lesson to heart in later relationships, perhaps even focusing too much on it. I may have at one point believed that all is well if you make your girl come. This is of course an oversimplification of how a relationship works, but perhaps only slightly. Anyway, if you want relationship advice, you probably shouldn't listen to me. But I can recommend a great book on the topic. You should read How the World Works by Noam Chomsky. You may not think there's any advice on how to make a relationship work in the book, but I promise and guarantee it is there. You just have to read the whole thing. Afterwards, if you still feel you haven't gotten any insight into the relationship question, you just haven't read the book carefully enough. Read it again, take notes, research stuff yourself, and surely you will learn how to get and keep a hot girl. I put my right hand on my mousepad, which is as good as the Bible for me, and solemnly promise. Chapter 17. Farewells. There was only a week left before Grundtvigs Folk High School was no more for me, and I had to return to my parents' house. My primary goal had been fulfilled, and I had also picked up a smattering of social skills in this intense 6 months period. I guess we could view it as compensating for my many years spent in bodily solitude in front of the screen, but I didn't gain any lasting relationships or friends that I talked to today. All my friends are dead, push me to the edge. I guess it's hard when everybody goes back to wherever they came from. Their hometowns, that is, not ashes to ashes. We all gathered outside in front of the flagpole that last day of the school. Here we sang a couple of songs, and then people started saying goodbye to each other. For some it was a very emotional moment, and many were hugging each other and crying, though that was mainly the girls. The triumvirate and the officers were standing among themselves and planning how they would meet up again soon at some festival. They were all looking forward to getting so drunk they would wallow in their own vomit and permanently damage their hearing. I felt a bit awkward standing there at the flagpole. I had not belonged to any group and made no close friendships, so there was no one I could naturally stand together with. So I kinda walked around and just said goodbye to people, though I doubt I would be missing them or they me. Mahmoud was nowhere to be seen. I did hug Eric when I said goodbye to him, though that was so awkward I think I will be doing you a favor if I refrain from describing it. Marcus was strangely a little timid when we said goodbye to each other. I suspect he thought that I had hard feelings towards him, or that I disliked him, but I thought he essentially was a decent fellow, perhaps a bit misguided, but overall not that bad. So I smiled to him and we shook hands. "Today is a special day," Marcus said, "so I'm not going to comment on the pants." He grinned, then he looked at me earnestly. "Thanks again for helping me out last week. He didn't suspect anything." "It was no problem really. I can't understand why everyone else was so reluctant to ask the janitor for you," I said. "They're just dicks. They wanted the janitor to get mad and shout at me again." "Well, anything they can do to get back at you for all your totally hilarious pranks," I told him, not sure if he would get my sarcasm. Marcus just smiled at me and turned back to the other guys. Last week he had approached me sheepishly to get me to go to the janitor to borrow a plunger, a suction thing to unclog his sink. He had puked in his sink again, and without exaggerating, I think it was the 7th time he had done it in a couple of months. He had borrowed the plunger so often that the last time the janitor had gotten really pissed at him. Not sure why really, But old men can be pretty strange and grumpy. Anyway, Marcus didn't dare to go ask him again, and nobody wanted to do it for him. So for a couple of days his sink got more and more disgusting. Finally he asked me, and I just did it, no problem. Took me 1 minute. Marcus was really surprised that I would help him, and also grateful, I think. The other boys were quite disappointed that I had intervened. Perhaps I had missed the memo saying, "Don't help Marcus," or as Mahmoud put it after I had intervened, "How dare you interrupt our experiment?" We expected life to spontaneously erupt from that sink soon. People had now made roughly 2 rows, so everybody would take turns meeting each other and saying goodbye. At some point I bumped into Hassan. I almost felt like just turning around and not shaking his hand, or God forbid, give him a hug. He had definitely been a jerk towards me during my stay, and here I did have hard feelings. We ended up just looking at each other. After a couple of seconds Hassan gave me a stupid smile, and I just nodded to him, having no expression on my face. Or perhaps I frowned at him. I kinda hope I frowned at him. Then I turned away from him, hopefully never to meet him again. It's crucial to one's happiness to cut off people like that from one's life. I had said farewell to almost everyone now, but I felt it was all pretty superficial, and it made me sad that I had spent 6 months here and nobody cared about me, and I didn't care about anyone else really. Mette had been trying to avoid me during the farewells, and had succeeded. I didn't go out of the way to say goodbye to her, and thought it better just to stay away from her if she didn't want to talk to me. At least Helen had given me a somewhat warm hug, but I still felt empty inside and depressed standing there at the flag. Where was Mahmoud? And then suddenly someone sprang at me from behind, tumbling me over down in the grass. "Thought you could escape me, eh, Lazarus?" the laughing voice of Mahmoud said as he sat on top of me. I wrenched myself free from him and tried to push him down in the grass, but he was too strong for that. "I had hoped I didn't have to see your ugly face again," I said, letting go of him. "Want me to consult the ladies so we can find out who's the most handsome?" he replied. "Nah, that's okay," I said, smiling at him. "I would rather not shatter your self-confidence." "Can't shatter what is based on cold hard scientific facts," he said. Saying goodbye to Mahmoud wiped away all my sad and depressing feelings. Here I felt was a human being who truly was going to miss me, and I was going to miss him. We hugged each other while both saying "no homo" almost in unison. That is almost 8 years ago, and I have not seen him since. I have no idea what he's doing today, but perhaps I will meet him again someday, though I am not sure that I would even recognize him if I saw him again. Friends come and friends go, and it's not always worth it spending a great amount of energy artificially keeping a friendship going. Epilogue. Paradise Lost. And I only am left alone that wants to tell thee. And I only am left alone that should tell thee. And I only am left alone that is able to tell thee. Lazarus. After the annihilation of everyone he had come to know the past year, desolate Ishmael floated in a coffin upon the waves. And I too would be alone, away from human intercourse, buried at my parents' house in my old room, my 2 guardians being pretty much my only company before I moved and started my philosophical studies. All the people from the school would henceforth be as if dead to me. If seen again, it would be the briefest chance encounter, a polite exchange, but mutually indifferent. It might as well have been a dream of lost ones, dimly recalled. Many times I have been asked whether or not I still talk to people from the school. I dislike the question. Either I tell the truth and feel like a loser, a social outcast that could not make a lasting friendship, or I lie and say sometimes and feel like a craven fraud. I know not what happened to Mahmoud and his paranoia, whether or not Eric finally managed to get a girlfriend, or if Martin got laid as much outside the school as he did in it. I also wonder if Helen is still doing anarchy stuff, and if so, how I can join her. I think the main problem with meeting people from the past is the terrible focus on status and how well people are doing, how high they have climbed or fallen in the hierarchy. The more similar your upbringing and the greater difference in positions on the ladder, the more resentment, jealousy, and pride will there be. It will not be a meeting of individuals who have shared a past and happy to see each other still alive and breathing. It will mainly be an opportunity to strut one's position and therefore worth, or to hide one's lack thereof. Another reason to dismantle our hierarchical society. Reunions will then be tolerable. "So wasn't it great? Are you not happy that you went there?" that mother of Lazarus asked once the son had returned. And truly she was right. It was a great experience, though not like she imagined. If not for my bodily infirmity, I'm sure I would have enjoyed it much more. But evaluating the whole experience today, I think going there was one of the best decisions in my life. First of all, and surpassing all else in importance, I got laid. Do not underestimate that achievement on the male psychology and self-confidence. Before you have made the double beast, it may be all you care about. But soon after it means almost nothing to you. Instead, what starts to matter is that it is now 3 months since you got laid, now 7 months, and so on. It is something that needs to be perpetually repeated until you are mature or perhaps decrepit enough not to care. Further benefits from Grundtvig's diminish in comparison to this vital sexy attainment. They are numerous and rather boring, to be honest. Getting better social skills, new perspectives, learning to live away from home, and so forth. So what is the verdict, the judgment, the final ruling of Lazarus? It can be summed up as follows. Who is Lazarus today? A very different Lazarus from the one who did not go to Grundtvig's folk high school. Who is the better version? The one who went. Did he ever consider going to a folk high school again? Would he perhaps go to such a place in the future? Fuck no. Should I try it? Sure, why not? But I recommend a room of one's own, especially if you're going to massage yourself. I am done. Oh, Herculean task.